everyone, and welcome back to another season of Cloudbusters. We are so thrilled to have you here. And look, we are in person, we are face to face, and in this season we're trying some new options because we're able to be out of our house. So we're trying out a studio setting today for this conversation. You'll be working with me during this season because Alex Hella, my co-host, is working on some other projects right now. We hope to have him back soon. Today, we are talking about a day in the life of a FinOps analyst. And I am so pleased to have my guest here with me today, Idalis Baez, who is the principal FinOps analyst with Thebes Cloud Management. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Now, folks, a little bit of context before we jump in. When I talk to organizations starting their FinOps journey or when we're doing FinOps trainings, we get a lot of questions about what exactly does a FinOps team do? Now, this makes sense. If you're starting a new process, a new methodology, you may not know what that day-to-day looks like. So here in the flesh, we have somebody who is doing that with the different clients, the UK enterprises that Thebes works with on their cloud journey. So, Idalis, as we get started, can you first give us the overview of the types of organizations you're working with? So why are they moving to cloud? Why might they be bringing in a FinOps practice?
Absolutely. So, first of all, we've seen a couple of main reasons. And the first one I would say is when an organization is being tasked with a large lift and shift initiative to go away from, say, traditional data centers that they are used to relying upon. And that is something that they're using in order to then say, okay, we need to now have greater efficiency with the way that we are deploying our services. And also we want to, say, reduce costs from our traditional CapEx models. So say we are no longer wanting to be the owners of these data centers. So that is one large, compelling event, you could call it, that we see. And one of the reasons why different FinOps organizations are then kind of thought of and say that inception and that idea of, hey, maybe we bring this in where then we can actually start to analyze and look at how do we take control of moving to the cloud, but optimizing it in a way that makes sense instead of just, hey, how do we do this? Are we going to just turn everything off from the on-premise world and then just attempt to light it all up in the cloud? But we don't really have that skill set yet. So how do we kind of manage that?
Right. And that makes sense. We all know that the migration into cloud is different skill sets. It is different technology, some of which requires a lot of automation or infrastructure as code around it. And then on top of that, you have this cost challenge and the fact that the finance team might be receiving a monthly invoice and who knows what happened between the first and the last day of the month. Right? So enter in your role and your organization to help provide, it almost sounds like a backbone of FinOps to help them adjust to the new reality.
Yeah. I would definitely say that. And bringing in what you were just saying around having that previous idea from the finance perspective of, say, a monthly budget, a monthly bill. On the flip side, as we know with variable cost model of the cloud, that isn't always something that can just easily be predicted. It's not always predictable. You don't know what that peak is going to look like. And actually a conversation that we've been seeing a lot recently is just kind of this question around what is this spike? And sometimes it's just the way that the billing cycle is going as far as a tax purpose. Versus, this spike is due to we had a lot of traffic because of some, whatever reason why we had external traffic consuming our services for that weekend, or maybe it's during the weekdays, whatever that peak might look like. So helping finance understand that is definitely part of the FinOps role.
And it's, let's come back to that because that touches on some of the challenges that your role and also FinOps teams and organizations in general face in the cloud migration. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about your actual day-to-day as you're working in that capacity. What does that look like? What are the primary responsibilities and also the primary people that you're working with?
So I'll start with where I sit within most organizations.
Popular question.
So we sit within, at least in this case, the office of the CIO. Sometimes it could be an organization has, say, the Cloud Circle of Excellence. I would typically see that in a more mature organization. However, in this in my main example, my main kind of client engagements, it's working alongside the data and reporting team, the likes of procurement or tech partnership, as well as along the same lines of the like project management kind of teams as well. So a little bit of both. I would say working most heavily with that data team and the tech partner team. And I think the reason for that comes from this idea of the data team tends to be the ones to help pull together any of those monthly, quarterly reports for the finance team, which then is brought up and in front of the senior leadership team, who then gets to kind of figure out what's happening to the business and why. And it's really important from a technology cost perspective, because that's typically been something that organizations don't really understand. At least organizations that may not have, say, a large understanding from how is engineering and how is IT supporting the business initiatives. So that tends to be where we sit.
They didn't have to understand it before in the same way. Of course, it's important. We want to connect our tech investments with our business and what we do. But because of this variable spend model that you're describing, all of a sudden it becomes critical to understand, what are we spending? Why are we spending it? So we know if it's good or bad. Then we can start to make a change.
Exactly.
So, okay, you've shared a lot about kind of creating reports, creating kind of visibility into the spend. What else fills up your time in this role?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it is also around education and communication across the teams, because there is this traditional mindset around, kind of as we mentioned before, whether it's the finance team, but also traditional mindsets around the engineering side of the house where, say, SREs or different squad teams, they are just used to being able to spin up whatever they want from a development side of the house, or, hey, I've got to deliver these services and I was told to make it as performant as possible without thinking about what is the cost benefit, or what is the cost going to impact? Am I taking advantage of, say, any type of like reserved instances, or those type of things that could help reduce costs, or am I doing it in an efficient way? So trying to help feed these extra little tips and tricks into the culture of the organization is something that I find myself doing, whether it's just little educational workshops, or whether it's also ensuring that, say, a policy around how to spin up environments appropriately is in a space where people can find it, read it, and execute it.
I'm not sure how much our audience knows about your background. You actually have a fairly technical background yourself, building out different solutions. Can you tell us more about that? Because your title says analyst, and of course it has the fin and the ops to it. But can you talk to us more about that overlap between the finance and the technology and the business piece that you have to do in this role?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a technology perspective, I would say I actually built my career from that side of the house. So really understanding what is it like from a developer standpoint, how to spin up various environments, what does it look like to connect it to networks, whether that means load balancing and a lot of network stuff and a lot of the security. It can be very nuanced and very complex. And then I would say I layered in and started to learn more about the finance side of the house. So I started off with the engineering mindset. And then as I started to learn more about what is OpEx, what is CapEx, what is amortization, you start to use this vernacular that is actually not something most engineers think of.
Sure.
Because why would you?
They?
You see an Amazon bill, you see a million line items, and then you just go, okay, what's the total? And that's it. Versus being able to actually kind of group together and categorize, hey, this amount of money is being spent on the databases I've spun up, but look at whether or not they're attached to critical applications. So there's an architectural mindset behind it that you also have to then attempt to have a little bit of a finance lens, because you want to be able to kind of segment what is business critical and what isn't.
Sure.
Yeah. Yep. And from then the operations side of the house, you would then be looking at when can I afford to, say, demote certain environments? When can I afford to take a look at, actually, can we turn these things on or off? One of the largest things over time that you would like to have an organization get to from a maturity perspective is being able to increase their elasticity. So what that means is, I'm sure you know, but it's just kind of ensuring that you can kind of follow the curve of your utilization of your compute resources, your storage, your network, So if you're going to have, say, a huge peak on a weekend and you know it's coming, get ready to scale up your environment, but then don't forget to scale it back down afterwards. That
Turn
you are
the lights off.
Yes, yeah. That way it will save you a lot of headache and a lot of money as well.
Yeah. Now, maybe this is a cheeky question, but do you have to have the tech background to take on a FinOps role?
I would actually say no, which might be a little controversial, but I think that the reason why I'm going to say no is because it is something that you don't need to actually know how to spin up all of these things within, say, an EC2 console or GCP or Azure. You don't actually need that nitty gritty, but I would say it is beneficial to at least understand from a high level architectural kind of perspective, what does it mean, that type of thing.
Right, know some of the jargon, like you said, EC2. Well, you need to know that that's a virtual server from Amazon. Okay, start with that vocab, understand the basics of tech. Yeah. And that way you have some credibility, it sounds like, with those engineers.
Yeah. Without having to go through, say, learning the whole solutions architecture.
Right, which, leave that to the solutions architects. But make sure that they feel heard as you're looking at these options and changes. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, let's get back to some of the challenges. So you already touched on one, which is this variable spend model. You've got a spike over here, something changes over there. Let me add to that is your existing applications might have these spikes while you're migrating. So you've got almost like a step function, and then there's variability, and then another step, right? So there's that challenge. Let's talk about other challenges that are specific to FinOps and specific to your role in your world.
Yeah. So I would say another large challenge, which might not seem like it should be as big of a challenge as it is, would be around communication and really level setting that playing field between, as you were saying before, between finance, between the technology and engineering side of the house, and between the operations or even procurement. So that, I think, really lends itself to trying to find that middle ground, because a lot of times you'll have the engineering team, they go to Confluence for everything as their source of truth. But then you have, say, most of the other teams, whether it's finance or, what other part of the house, is just messaging through Microsoft Teams or using SharePoint or, unfortunately, email. It's still something where, everybody is going to be communicating in a different way. And so that ends up being something that is one of the first things and kind of the bedrock for how are you going to ensure that we're all looking in the same place. We're all kind of speaking the same language, because even as I alluded to before, there are going to be different key terms and words that engineering will say, but finance is going to call it something else. So,
but that can be sort of a vocab exchange. Here is amortization. Oh, thank you very much. Here is data transfer for you. Oh, great. But you bring up a good point, is you have to meet people where they are. So do you live in Slack or Jira or Confluence? Okay, I will get to you. Because we all need to work together in this new model. And so I will try to make it as easy for you as possible.
I think the last challenge that I will bring up is accountability.
Oh, big one.
Yeah. And the reason why is because I've had conversation after conversation around question marks, where people are getting into a room and they're saying, I don't own that spend. I don't own that budget. And it's almost as if they're in a room kind of tossing a hot potato around, and nobody wants to be the one that is stuck with it. But at the end of the day, it needs to be a conversation that is had, because everybody needs to understand, okay, if this is my project and I'm the owner of it, then I need to be the one ensuring that my costs aren't getting out of control. Or if we're running under budget, great. What does that mean? How can we reinvest our savings? So it's a really key part of this idea of the FinOps journey that is a really difficult one. A lot of people don't want to own up to it, but it's important, and it will be empowering when you get people to do that.
Well, that reminds me of all the orgs who use third-party contractors because they don't have enough people or internal skills. So that's great. You can migrate faster, but you need to tag that or put it in its own specific subscription or account, because if you've got a third party doing the migration and you pass it over, someone's going to go, I don't know what this is, and I'm in charge of it. Well, I can't turn it off. It's like, actually, you can turn that off.
Yeah.
We're done with that.
Yep.
Right? So you have to tag it, and then you have to educate and
Yes.
communicate, or else people are just going to pass the hot potato.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh man, let's flip it. So instead of challenges, let's talk about some of the benefits, some of the rewards that an organization gets out of your role in a FinOps team in general.
Yeah, so I'll start with the first one. There was a really large exercise against the entire Amazon Web Services estate where, where basically the entire engineering team sat down and looked through all of their environments, all of their tagging, and did a huge right sizing activity.
Bravo.
And it was maybe a little painful, but really successful. And the cost optimization that they got just from that first kind of cost takeout exercise was impactful. And it also really showed to the senior leadership team why it's so important to have this idea of FinOps within the culture of the organization. Now, we're trying to make that a more regular thing. So hoping to implement that type of large exercise at least twice a year is kind of the way I'm trying to push it. And then quarterly would be amazing. But one step at a time, because it does take a lot of energy and effort from multiple team members, and they kind of all need to be in the room, and they all need to kind of talk through it and take action right away instead of just talking about it. And
it's a ton of coordination. Did someone in that org sponsor it? Right?
Yes.
Like, how else do you herd all those cats?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was definitely sponsored, particularly by the head of the office of the CIO.
Okay.
So that was really helpful. It was one of the first, hey, large key initiatives, let's do this, and then we can set up like a bedrock and a framework for implementing these kind of FinOps policies and have this governance in place. So I would say another big achievement is a weekly kind of approval process meeting where anything that's going to be walked on to a budget, or anything that may be going over budget, or say extra licenses, whatever that approval may be, it's actually first kind of gated through the lens of the FinOps role before being passed on to, say, the head of the office of the CIO. And it's a quick checkpoint to ensure, okay, is there either senior leadership backing this up? Is there a strategic lever backing this up? What is the justification? Okay, yes, you are granted. Go ahead to be signed.
Go forth in cloud.
Exactly. Or you didn't follow protocol. Please come back and try again.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's actually been really useful because it's helping reduce this idea of that shadow IT nightmare and the spend crawl, and where all of a sudden finance turns back around and they say, excuse me, you allowed how many extra add-on licenses, and we should not have, or our renewal for this contract was coming up and you didn't even ask and you could have waited, or whatever that might be.
Just all that context that communication could fix.
Exactly.
Wow. What a powerful first win, too, for the org. Like, I can imagine how much coordination that took.
Yeah.
But you can then lean back on that and say, hey, this team made this architectural change. And it saved this much, didn't impact performance.
Exactly.
Wow. Or this team improved latency, but I don't know, we're able to reduce data transfer. I'm just making things up, right? No, but you get those wins.
Yeah.
And you've got credibility for the movement and that behavior. And maybe people start to do it a little on their own, right? You've got a Winboard, and people can go, I could do that.
Yeah. And that's actually another, you bring up kind of this idea of views or boards into the data. So that's something that is being utilized across the various squads and the various SREs, where then they've kind of been incentivized to say, hey, this is a huge chunk from our tagging that's actually still set as untagged, or we've got these unclaimed assets. Who owns them? Please help us. And so they're going in and kind of turning things off that need to be retired. So that was another big part of, when we're talking about the impetus for beginning a FinOps journey. Another one was around this idea of refactoring and retiring old legacy, just whatever it might be, infrastructure or applications or services. And that's one of the exercises that has continuously been going on, because if you're able to either consolidate, say, hey, this team and this team are using two completely separate tools, do the same thing, why don't we consolidate to, say, the same monitoring tool?
There you go.
So that type of thing is continuously occurring in a bit of a natural way, but it's definitely it's definitely a learning and growing experience for the teams.
Bravo. Well, well
Yeah.
done to that org and all the orgs that you and Thebes are working with. Before we wrap up, what is your advice to organizations that are going through cloud migrations and looking at the challenges of cloud and the potential solutions that FinOps can offer? What do you advise them?
I would advise that first of all, take a holistic look of, what are they trying to achieve? So take a look at that, and then the why are they say utilizing certain providers, and then start to look at where are they actually like spending their money. Is it mostly databases? Is it mostly network costs? Is it? And then you can kind of start to map out the why and the what with the how are they doing it.
Yeah.
I think just trying to understand that lay of the land first is really important, and then over communication. I would say it's might be difficult and it might feel uncomfortable at first, but over communicating everything that you find or asking questions. Sometimes there have been conversations that other people in the organization go, oh, wait, let me see that dashboard again, or let me see that explanation.
Yeah.
I had no idea that we were spending X amount of money on this database or on whatever it may be, and then it sparks a conversation. So don't be afraid to over communicate any thought.
Yeah, it's a good point, right?
Yeah.
Don't assume people know things. Present that information, explain, let them ask questions.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. So good job to you and the orgs that you work with, and thank you so much for sharing with everyone what you actually do day to day. And we really appreciate you joining us. And thank you everyone out there in Radio Land for tuning in for our second season of Cloudbusters. If you have a question or if you'd like to get in touch, you can reach us on our LinkedIn group. You can also contact us at cloudbusters@appdio.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.